Right now, we're looking at the book of Proverbs, which contains many sayings of wise sages. So, this book is helpful to make you wise, although Proverbs can be used in very unwise ways. As Proverbs itself says, that a proverb in the mouth of a fool is like a thorn or a thorn bush in the hands of a drunkard. When a person's drunk, they may not recognize what they're doing with the thorns. Anyway, these are short, succinct statements of general principle, and often they're addressed to my son. Now, that follows the genre of ancient Egyptian wisdom collections, normally addressed by the king to his son, the next ruler. So, naturally, Solomon or any other king would also address their son with wisdom for how to rule. Now, that didn't mean that these proverbs were always written by the king, although in the case of Solomon, we hear that he actually did have a lot of wise sayings, but they could be written by somebody else on behalf of the king for the king to instruct his son as well. This is a genre that's common to many cultures. So you have proverbs in West Africa, you have proverbs in Central Africa, where my wife is from. You can also compare the wise sayings of Confucius in China, and many of those sayings really are very wise. Even in the US, we have some short, succinct sayings like haste makes waste from Ben Franklin, or study or you'll flunk my class from yours truly. The nature of Proverbs as short, succinct statements of principle mean that some principles, as they're stated so succinctly, may contradict each other in specific practice. For example, Proverbs 26, 4 and 5, placed side by side to make sure you don't miss this important interpretive point. Don't answer fools according to their folly, or you'll be like them yourself. Answer fools according to their folly, or they'll be wise in their own eyes. In other words, you have to take them as summaries of certain principles that also sometimes have to be balanced against some other principles. So you don't claim Proverbs as legal guarantees. Now you can pray, God, based on this principle, this is what I'm praying for. But they're not meant to be claimed as legal guarantees that always happen exactly this way. When you're preaching from Proverbs, for those of you who preach or teach, you can link different statements in the same topic, and I'll illustrate that later, but doing the brief introduction first. So there are different ways to do context. Sometimes it's by subgenre or by topic, as in the book of Proverbs, where they're not actually arranged uh, in paragraphs, usually, because usually they're just in a couple lines. So raise up a child in the way that they should go. But we can see from Second Chronicles that some children were raised up nicely, didn't turn out well, and vice versa. Thanks be to God for the vice versa, for Josiah turning out well, despite Ammon and most of the time of Manasseh, the previous rulers. The hand of the diligent makes rich. I like that. I try to be diligent. But what about Paul in prison? I mean, he could be diligent, but I mean, what's he going to do in terms of earning his living? Maybe he can do his leather working trade or whatever. But basically, rich is a relative term. Context operates differently in Proverbs than it does in much of the Bible. Proverbs is a mostly randomly arranged collection, like Proverbs 25:1 suggests. These are the Proverbs that the men of Hezekiah chiseled out. So one needs to arrange them according to topic to get sort of a context for them. Because these are principles, one can't use their conventional wisdom to say, this is always the way it's going to be. This other side of Hebrew wisdom appears in the book of Job and the book of Ecclesiastes. So raise up a child can't be used to judge those for whom it doesn't appear to have worked, especially in the short run. But let's take some examples of topics in Proverbs. By the way, I'm just giving that one as an example. I'm delighted by the way my children have turned out, but it's not guaranteed always. So, an example, Proverbs about the tongue or the mouth. These are wisdom sayings about how we should talk. They're not promises that we can use our mouths to claim things. We can know this by comparing all the different proverbs about the mouth. So some popular teachers have used texts like the following to argue that we can speak good or harm into others' lives. There may be a sense, but let's look at them first. The tongue has the power of life and death, and those who love it will eat its fruit. Reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Now, whatever one thinks of that view based on other texts, Proverbs isn't really saying you can just speak things, make whatever you want happen. So let's listen to some of the other Proverbs on the topic. From the fruit of one's lips, one is filled with good things, and the work of one's hands brings reward. From the fruit of one's lips, one enjoys good things, but the unfaithful have a craving for violence. Whoever guards their lips guards their life, but whoever speaks rashly will come to ruin. Whoever guards their mouth and their tongue keeps themselves from calamity. It's like if you say to your boss, "Oh, I think I think you're just crazy." Your boss may say, "Oh, I think you're just fired." Your mouth can get you in trouble. Your mouth can also hurt somebody's feelings, especially your children. It can affect them in negative ways or in positive ways. You can instill confidence or you can instill a lot of grief. So, how you speak affects your relationships and it's your livelihood. The words of the rich and poor are not just confessions. 1823, a poor person pleads for mercy, but a rich person answers harshly. 1907, a poor person is shunned by all their relatives. How much more do all their friends avoid them? Though the poor person pursues them with pleading, they're nowhere to be found. Well, compare some Egyptian proverbs. Pharaoh's tongue was increase. What is that about? Well, his orders can issue the provision of food. What does it mean that the tongue brings healing? Well, other sources of healing in Proverbs: fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. It brings preservation from the death that comes on the evil, as we see in Proverbs chapter 1, where it talks about gang violence and so on. Proverbs 4:22, the Father's instructions are life to those who find them and health to their whole body. So the wise person is kept safe from trouble. 12:18, reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. We build people up or tear them down with our words to them. For example, if we yell at our children. By the way, I do believe that God heals people, but I'm just saying this verse is sometimes not used in quite the way that it was meant to be used. 13:17, a wicked messenger falls into trouble, but a trustworthy envoy brings healing. Someone who might misrepresent one's message is not worth the risk. Be careful whom you send, like an archer who wounds everyone, another proverb says. So is the person who sends a message by the hand of a fool. Be discerning to whom you send a message. I have sent messages to people who said, "Oh, please pass this on to them." They got relayed in ways that got me in trouble that were not exactly what I said. Anyway, Proverbs 14:30, a heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. You got to chill sometimes. So, various principles in Proverbs. But the real principle in talking about the tongue, or one of the main principles in talking about the tongue, whenever possible, we need to encourage one another, not tear each other down. Proverbs 15:13, a happy heart makes the face cheerful, but heartache crushes the spirit. Well, the same way with speech. 16:24, pleasant words are a honeycomb, sweet to the soul and healing to the bones. 17:22, a cheerful heart is good medicine. but a crushed spirit dries up the bones. 25:25, like cold water to a weary soul is good news from a distant land. So some ways of speaking can be encouraging. And some ways, even when your message is not going to be as happy, there are ways to frame it that can be more encouraging, unless it's meant to be, thus says the Lord, you're under judgment. Well, sometimes you've got to relay those in ways that get people's attention. But anyway, compare Aramaic sayings. Don't treat lightly a king's word. Let it be healing for you. It's not speaking here about supernatural healing, but about the way you take wording. His speech is soft, yet it proves sharper and more powerful than a keen knife. The king's tongue is soft, but it breaks the ribs of a dragon, even like an invisible plague. Well, these Gentiles weren't advocating speaking things into being. They were discussing the power of speech and influencing others, kings being a particularly notorious example of being quite influential. The mouth stands for speech and is used in conjunction with other appendages that represent their respective functions in Proverbs, like eyes and feet and fingers and so forth. Edifying by the mouth, therapeutic speech. An anxious heart weighs a person down, but a kind word cheers one up. A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. The tongue that brings healing is a tree of life, but a deceitful tongue crushes the spirit. One finds joy in giving an apt reply, and how good is a timely word. Like cold water to a weary soul, so is good news from a distant land. A word aptly spoken is like apples of gold in settings of silver, like an earring of gold or an ornament of fine gold is a wise person's rebuke to a listening ear, well framed. Silence is also a major emphasis in Proverbs. Speak wisdom or shut up. If you're wise, your wisdom will reward you. If you're a mocker, you alone will suffer. Proverbs 11, whoever lacks judgment makes fun of their neighbor, but a person of understanding holds their tongue. Gossip betrays confidence, but a trustworthy person knows how to keep a secret. 12:16, a fool shows their annoyance at once, but a prudent person overlooks an insult. The prudent keep even their knowledge to themselves, but the heart of fools blurts out folly. So there's a place for speaking knowledge, but not to a person who's going to just trample your wisdom. The tongue of the wise commends knowledge, but the mouth of fools gushes folly. So watch what you say. And here are some more Proverbs. I won't read all of these. But one who answers before listening, that's folly and shame. If you argue your case with a neighbor, don't betray another person's confidence. Like in the heat of argument, well, so-and-so told me this about you. You just got that other person in trouble. Don't speak too hastily, it says. Now, some of this wisdom is transcultural. That is, other cultures in the ancient Near East and elsewhere also warn against the dangers of excessive speech. In Egypt, one of the proverbs was, don't talk a lot, be silent, and so stay happy. And another one, don't empty your belly to everybody, nor damage their regard for you. Don't spread your words to the common people, nor associate yourself with somebody too outgoing in heart. In other words, don't spill the beans. Don't spill your ideas on people that are just going to spill them to everybody else. Be discreet and entrust your wisdom to people who also can be discreet. And so on. There's also another common topic related to the tongue, and that's the topic against falsehood. Watch out for speaking falsehood. 10:18, one who conceals their hatred has lying lips, and whoever speaks slander is a fool. A couple different kinds of bad speaking there. One where you are hateful toward a person, but you speak nicely, but you're not behind their back. And then spreading slander. That's another whole topic in Proverbs that will come up soon. A truthful witness gives honest testimony, but a false witness tells lies. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only for a moment. You also can get caught in it often. The Lord detests lying lips, but he delights in people who are truthful. And a whole bunch of other proverbs on the same topic, like a 25:18, like a club or a sword or a sharp arrow is the person who gives false testimony against their neighbor. And that may be in court, but the principle is even broader than that. It's part of this broader theme. One who deceives their neighbor and says, I was just joking when I said that. That doesn't go over too well. Now, you have this in other cultures. Here are some similar proverbs from Egypt and Syria from antiquity. Don't talk with a person falsely. That's the abomination of the deity. Don't cut off your heart from your tongue, that all your affairs may be successful. God hates the one who falsifies words, and so forth. Other ancient Near Eastern texts on the tongue, we talked about the messenger. Well, in Egypt, if you're a person of intimacy, whom one great man sends to another, be thoroughly reliable when they send you. Carry out the errand as he's spoken. Don't be reserved about what they've said to you, and beware of any act of forgetfulness. Grasp hold of truth and don't exceed it. Speech also could earmark rebellion, and we see various ancient Near Eastern proverbs about that. Now coming to what we mentioned, slander and gossip. This is so common today. It gets modeled for us all the time in political rhetoric on both sides of the aisle, although some individuals are more prone to this than are others. But anyway, slander and gossip. Where servants are, there is quarrel. Where contentions are, there is slander. This is an Akkadian proverb. Don't slander. Speak what's fine. Speak no evil. Tell what's good, and so forth. And many other proverbs in the tongue. Many others. So watch out for a person with a big mouth. Proverbs also deals with laziness. We'll deal with slander in Proverbs a little bit later, but it's obviously related to this theme, and so we'll kind of treat it more cursorily later. Laziness in Proverbs. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Pay attention to the ant. Consider its ways and be wise. How long will you lie there, you sluggard? When will you get up from your sleep? Lazy hands make for poverty, but diligent hands bring wealth. Again, is a relative term. As vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so are sluggards to those who send them. A lot of kinds of making fun of people we're really going to go over very well today. But I think we're still allowed to tell sluggard jokes. I mean, they're in the Bible. So jokes about, the lazy person. Some people are so lazy that they go hungry because, they're so lazy. The food's right in front of them and they're too lazy to bring it to their mouth. That's in the book of Proverbs. Or the person who won't go out in the street because they say, there might be a lion out there. It's too dangerous for me to go outside. So sometimes we have to make ourselves be diligent. Diligent hands will rule, but laziness hands enforce labor. You're going to end up working for somebody else. And where's the picture of this guy who looks half asleep? Anyway, there's a lot of other ones we could go through, but these are all just examples. As you see, there are a lot of sluggard jokes in the book of Proverbs and a lot of wisdom about sluggards. So do you see somebody skilled in their work? Proverbs 22:29. They'll serve before kings. They won't serve before officials of low rank. So be diligent, work hard, and it will bring you progress. Now, again, these are statements of general principle. So this is not like if somebody has just lost their job because of cuts. This is not to say to them, you lazy person. It's not their fault. Uh, and anyway, but a diligent person will do their best to find work of some sort. And when we can't find the ideal work, then we do other kinds of work. Like I, um, during my beginning of my master's work, I was working in a fast food restaurant. I was also pastoring at the time, but it was a small congregation, and I was supporting myself by working in a fast food restaurant. So, we do what we have to, but ultimately, hopefully, we can things can get better. Now, this is also true on a corporate level for societies, but again, it's not always people's fault. Sometimes there's corruption in the government. Sometimes there's um, drought that leads to famine. There's all sorts of other factors. But whatever the situation is, the harder you work, normally, the better off you'll be relative to whatever situation you're in. And here again are some more. As it 26:14, as a door turns and it edges, so does a sluggard on their bed. Like, ugh, they just roll over. That's their version of hard work. A sluggard buries his hand in the dish, too lazy to bring it back to his mouth and eat. Sluggard is wiser in his own eyes than 7 people who can give a discreet answer. Hey, there's also a lot of proverbs on the subject of strife. So Proverbs 6:19 talks about one who spreads strife among brothers. 10:12, hatred stirs up strife, but love covers all transgressions. 13:10, through insolence comes nothing but strife. 15:18, a hot-tempered man stirs up strife. And so on, a whole bunch more of them, as you can see. And a lot of these overlap with the ones on anger. And some of these also have to do with marriage. It's better to live in a corner of a roof than in a house shared with a contentious woman. And I'm sure it goes the other way. But remember, these are often framed as the king speaking wisdom to his son. So they're normally addressed to males, but the principles can go both ways. Anger proverbs. A fool's anger is known at once, but a prudent man conceals dishonor. So if you lose your temper too fast, you're going to regret it most likely. Sometimes I lose my temper and I even, well, when the thing on the screen freezes, I found out why they call it a cursor. But actually, uh, if we control our temper, it's much better, especially with somebody else, because that affects our relationships. Proverbs 14:29, whoever is slow to anger has great understanding, but whoever is quick-tempered exalts folly. That doesn't mean we just hold it in forever, but we want to do something productive with it, or wait till the emotion is past and we calm down. Speaking of Proverbs and ancient wisdom, some of the Greek philosophers spoke of anger as temporary insanity. The part of our brain that processes danger, so generates the fight or flight reaction. We may have to fight, we may have to run, but that's anger comes out really quickly. But if you have time to stop and think about it, you can actually cool down. Now, anger that simmers for a long time, that's really bad for you. But the anger that's like blows up in the moment, sometimes we don't need to fight or flee. We can calm down and Gentle answer turns away wrath. Proverbs 15:1, as we already mentioned. So, a hot-tempered person stirs up strife, but the slow to anger calms a dispute. Whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who captures a city. So talk about self-control, that's even greater than some other kind of control. But some have an anger management problem, and blowing up, people tend to avoid people like that after a while, especially if they've been around it. If you've come from an abusive background, being abused, that's like poison. It's like it feels toxic to you when somebody can't control their temper. So, a lot of proverbs about planning ahead. Again, you think about the ants. They store the provisions in summer. Oh, no, sorry. That's maybe later in Proverbs 6, where he says, stores its provisions in summer, gathers its food at harvest. Is that talking about the ant? Well, earlier it's certainly talking about be like the ant. And we're supposed to do that too. A wise person is cautious and turns away from evil, but a fool is arrogant and careless. Plans are established by seeking advice. So if you wage war, obtain guidance, and that's stated a lot. The prudent see danger and take refuge, but the simple keep going and pay the penalty. Get your fields ready. After that, build your house. So decide what needs to be done first with the long range effects, or that's most urgent. Think about the right way, right sequence in which to do things. Plan ahead. The prudent see danger and take refuge. Simple keep going and pay the penalty. Ants are creatures of little strength, yet they store up their food in the summer. Now coming to slander, which is so common today. Ooh, just try posting something online. Let me not go off too much on this. But for example, there was one one girl who was just, singing a song, and somebody posted, "You're ugly." I mean, that's just downright mean. I mean, it's all right. You can tell me I'm bald, but hey, uh, don't tell a girl she's ugly, especially a young girl. Anyway, uh, I have a friend who's written extensively. She writes for Psychology Today sometimes. She, I don't know if she's still writing for the Huffington Post, but she did a lot. She's a professor at Indiana University, and she was, um, you know, making a short, succinct article that could be easily readable. And some people said, you never read this study. Well, actually, she has read that study, and she critiqued it thoroughly in a chapter in a book she wrote for Harvard. But anyway, people people like to shoot off their mouth online, especially under the veil of anonymity. But let me get back to the Proverbs themselves. So, Proverbs 16:28, a perverse person stirs up conflict and a gossip separates close friends. Don't believe everything somebody tells you about your friend. You can check it out, but don't just take it just because somebody says it. And sometimes there are people who are accused of things, and sometimes the accusations are true, sometimes they're not. Sometimes it's wise to wait and see before jumping on the bandwagon. Um, and again, I mean, sometimes the accusations are true, but sometimes I've seen them not be true. And sometimes actually, I've seen them not be true, but what got a big headline when it was an accusation gets a slight retraction or no retraction at all when it turns out to be false. So careful about gossip, and be careful definitely about slander, which by definition is false as well as normally malicious. 26:20, without wood a fire goes out, without a gossip a quarrel dies down. The words of a gossip are like choice morsels. Oh, they go into the innermost parts. We enjoy hearing things interesting, but some things interesting are not good for us. And so we need to be careful before jumping on something we hear. Pride. Hmm. Proverbs talks a lot about this. Proverbs 11:2, when pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. Proverbs 14:16, the wise fear the Lord and shun evil, but a fool is hot-headed, yet feels secure. The Lord tears down the house of the proud, but he sets the widow's boundary stones in place. Humility comes before honor. Pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Better to be lowly in spirit along with the oppressed than to share plunder with the proud, and so forth. Proverbs on advice and correction. Since you disregard all my advice and don't accept my rebuke, since they wouldn't accept my advice and spurn my rebuke, they're going to be in trouble. Proverbs 5, you'll say, how I hated discipline, how my heart spurned correction. Too late now, I'm in such trouble. And I actually skipped some on this subject where it's saying, heed your father's instruction and your mother's advice. But that, of course, it's assuming that it's sound advice. But if you're young, it's on average more likely that your parents' advice will be wiser than your guesses, because they have more experience. But we'll come more to the issue of parents later on. So Proverbs 10:17, whoever heeds discipline shows the way to life, but whoever ignores correction leads others astray. For lack of guidance, a nation falls, but victory is won through many advisors. Remember, we said there are a number of proverbs about through many counselors, you protect yourself from going the wrong way. Get all the advice on the table and then evaluate it. So King Rehoboam made a big mistake. He listened to his fellow young advisors and not the older advisors. Now, it doesn't always work that way. Sometimes the young have fresh ideas. Sometimes the old are just stuck in their ways. But in that case, Rehoboam listened to the wrong ones. He should have listened to the elders in that case. So whoever disregards discipline comes to poverty and shame, but whoever heeds correction is honored. And again, a lot of this wisdom is transcultural. So Plutarch, writing in the early 2nd century, has an essay on how to profit from people speaking ill of you. Now, that's not to say that Plutarch always did that. Actually, he has another whole essay accusing of Herodotus, the Greek historian Herodotus, of malice, because Herodotus dared to criticize Boeotia, which is where Plutarch was from. He was, I guess, a bit sensitive about that. Anyway, stern discipline awaits anyone who leaves the path. The one who hates correction will die. Mockers resent correction, so they avoid the wise. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed. Whoever heeds life-giving correction will be at home among the wise. I'm probably not the best person at heeding correction, but sometimes I do. Problem is when you get conflicting advice, like shave off your beard, Craig, or it looks nice, Craig, but flattery gets you nowhere. That's another proverb, modern one, but there's plenty of those. I subsumed them under the tongue, but plenty of those in Proverbs as well, and in other ancient sources. Listen to advice and accept discipline. At the end, you'll be counted among the wise. Well, part of this is listening to Proverbs. You're listening to wise advice. Plans are established by seeking advice, so if you wage war, obtain guidance. Haven't I written 30 sayings for you? Sayings of counsel and knowledge. Discipline. My son, don't despise the Lord's discipline and don't resent his rebuke, because the Lord disciplines those he loves, as a father disciplines the son in whom he delights. And uh, Proverbs 10:13, wisdom is found in the lips of the discerning, but a rod is for the back of one who has no sense. We don't usually use corporal discipline today, like smacking somebody on the back, but words can be used that way too. But sometimes people don't heed that and they get themselves in worse trouble, like with the law or something like that. And discipline, one way or the other, tends to come to people. But it's better that it comes than that people keep going the wrong way. And this is also used for children. Whoever spares the rod hates their children, but the one who loves their children is careful to discipline them. Again, today we don't usually do that, and not all children need that. But, and I've seen it be done in very abusive ways, but discipline of various sorts is needed so that children will grow up in the right way. Again, not abusively, but um, you know, timeouts or whatever. A fool spurns a parent's discipline, but whoever heeds correction shows prudence. And again, we have more of those kind of overlaps with the ones about correction. Parents. So I didn't ask my parents if I could use their pictures, so I used one of my wife and me as parents with our kids who have kind of previously given me permission to use their pictures. And this is an old picture, so they don't look like that anymore. Of course, neither do my wife and I. Because the Lord disciplines those he loves as a father, the son in whom he delights. So thinking of God as a father who disciplines us when he disciplines us because he loves us, not abusively. If it's abusive, it's not your heavenly father doing it. But anyway, Proverbs of Solomon, a wise son brings joy to his father, but a foolish son brings grief to his mother. As you see in Hebrew poetry, the second line often echoes the first, sometimes develops the first, and especially in places like Proverbs, is kind of a contrast with the first. But it's still parallel in some sense. So the wise son brings joy to his father, a foolish son brings grief to his mother. And if you're a parent, you've probably experienced the joy of children's wisdom and maybe the grief of their foolishness. Sometimes it's funny, but it depends on how grieving it is. Yeah, let me not give examples. But we also have this opportunity with our parents. We can bring them joy, or we can do something that embarrasses them. So we have a bunch of other proverbs like this. So just many topics in Proverbs. And as we put them together, we can understand better what each of those topics means on any given proverb.